The council meeting for the 13th of July 2021, which I now declare open. Although members of the public can't join us in person tonight, our meetings remain open to the public via the live stream on our website, and I extend a warm welcome to all of you who are watching online. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Moonee Valley is located, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past, present and emerging. We also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Councillors, item 3 on the agenda is apologies and leave of absence, and I've not received any apologies or requests for leave of absence this evening. Item 4 is the confirmation of minutes. So, councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Thursday, the 24th of June 2021 be confirmed? Moved Councillor Bedio, seconded Councillor Tyson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 5 is declarations of conflicts of interest. And does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening? Councillor Sypek.
10.8.
Yes. Do you want to state the conflict or?
Oh, as previously established by.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a conflict in 10.8 due to reasons disclosed previously to the CEO.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to declare a conflict in item 10.8 on the agenda due to items previously disclosed to the CEO in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor? I will also declare 10.8 a general conflict of interest for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO. Any other conflicts? If not, move to item 6, presentations. Councillors, do we have any presentations this evening? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to note that last week was NAIDOC week, and we had a really significant and really wonderful celebration, I think, with the NAIDOC flag raising ceremony down at the Crown Street Stables. We had Uncle Ringo Terrick from the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung Council attend to perform a welcome and smoking ceremony, and Uncle Bob Williams also representing Torres Strait Islanders to raise the flag alongside myself as Deputy Mayor officiating. And yeah, it was a wonderful afternoon and a really significant way to mark NAIDOC Week, which is an opportunity to celebrate the achievements and the strength and survival of our First Nations peoples. So.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillors have a presentation this evening? If not, we move to item 7, petitions and joint letters. Councillors, do we have any petitions or joint letters this evening? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. Council was presented with a joint letter requesting that Council implement 1P permits apply signs in front of 172 to 182 Pascoe Road, Moonee Ponds, in front of the RZ1 properties. So I'd like to move that Council...
No motion, yes.
I'd like to move that Council resolves to A, receive and note the joint letter requesting 1P in front of 172 to 182 Pascoe Road, Moonee Ponds. B, refer this matter to the Director of Service Delivery for investigation and reporting back to Council. And C, advise the joint letter organiser accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, wish to speak to the joint letter? Councillor Isa. Put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 8 is public question time, and we've received 2 questions from members of the community for tonight's meeting. As we do not have residents in the public gallery, I propose that we move to suspend the provisions in our governance rules requiring questioners to be present in the gallery. That will enable me to read the questions that have been submitted in advance and for the CEO or a councillor to read the responses. Councillors, may I please have a mover that Council resolves to temporarily suspend the public question provisions in its governance rules to allow questions from the gallery to be read by the Mayor and responses read out by the CEO or councillor for this meeting. Moved Councillor Tyson, seconded Councillor Byrne. I'll put that to the vote. It's carried unanimously. The first question this evening comes from Ian Woods. Ian's question reads, "It is understood that the wording of Council's seasonal facility allocation agreement, brackets agreement, is that a club that has entered into that agreement inter alia must show respect and act with courtesy when interacting with local residents. If a club's members or executives, for example, have made threats against local residents and Council has been fully briefed on that matter, is this considered non-compliance by the club? And if so, what actions does Council take in those circumstances?" I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Ian. Through the Mayor, Moonee Valley City Council takes resident complaints seriously and is committed to investigating allegations received against users of council-managed facilities to ensure behaviour is in keeping with the agreement. The process includes reviewing the evidence provided, having discussions with impacted parties prior to determining an outcome. Not all outcomes reached result in disciplinary action, although this may be one determination from the process. Council is currently undertaking a review of the seasonal allocation policy, which may also include a review of current items and current terms and conditions, including compliance investigations. Council continues to work with clubs and residents to ensure good relationships between user groups and residents and the local community. If a person feels behavior by another is threatening or publicly inappropriate, this is a police matter, and Council recommends making contact with the police when the matter occurs. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The second question tonight comes from Moira Deeming, who asks Council, under Victorian law, is it legal for local government councils to provide sex-based targeted services and facilities separately to gender identity-based targeted services and facilities? If not, why not? For example, can we legally put signs on a set of public toilets declaring that one is for biological males, including males with an intersex condition, one is for biological females, including biological females with an intersex condition, and one is for people with transgender identities of any biological sex? If not, why not? Councillors and those watching online, while it's not common practice for the Mayor to answer public questions, our governance rules allow the CEO or a councillor at the Chair's discretion to answer questions from the public. As such, as Chair, I've decided I will answer this question. Can I also state that Council's public question time provides the capacity for members of the public to ask genuine questions pertaining to Council-related matters. Public question time is not an opportunity for councillors elected elsewhere to come into our chambers and use our council meeting as a platform to spread their homophobic or transphobic views. Moira Deeming, or Councillor Moira Deeming, as she should have identified herself, is an elected member of Melton City Council. Councillor Deeming has already received an answer to her generic question, given she asked an almost identical question at Darebin City Council's ordinary meeting of council on the 28th of June of this year. Darebin CEO Sue Wilkinson answered Councillor Deeming's question perfectly, stating, quote, "Both the Federal Sex Discrimination Act 1994, as amended by the Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity and Intersex Status Amendment Act 2013, and the Victorian Equal Opportunity Act 2010, are anti-discrimination legislation that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, gender identity or intersex status. Under these laws, it is discriminatory to require a person who is transgender to use a toilet which is not aligned with their gender identity. Section 8 of the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities Act 2006 reiterates the right for all Victorians to equality and non-discrimination, ensuring everyone has the same rights and beliefs and the same level of respect and dignity. Similarly, the Gender Equality Act 2020, which is Victorian legislation, highlights the need to redress advantage, address stigma, stereotyping, prejudice and violence against persons of different genders. and to enhance social participation by persons of different genders, close quote. As such, Councillor Deeming has already received an answer to her generic question, which is not Moonee Valley specific, and as such, in my opinion, is nothing more than trying to bring divisive and offensive rhetoric into our chambers and into our city. And as Mayor, I will not sit here and tolerate this. We are so often told to speak up for those who don't have a voice. So here is my voice. Moonee Valley is a city that celebrates inclusion, embraces diversity, and that values every single member of our city regardless of who they are, what background they are from, or how they identify. We celebrate our differences. In fact, they are what makes this such an amazing city to live in, work in, and to represent. Councillor Deeming has a history of homophobic and transphobic statements that have had a damaging effect on members of the LGBTIQA+ community in the western suburbs. Her article published in The Spectator last year, in which she labelled the progress of the rights and recognition of the trans community as the transgender inquisition, was as offensive as it was hurtful, and was the sort of diatribe that does nothing but fuel transphobia. The article suggested that for people like her, a cisgender heterosexual female, being forced to accept the transgender community is on par with the cruel and extreme practices against dissenters during the Spanish Inquisition in the 15th century. She stated, quote, "Whilst the Spanish Inquisition used physical torture and exile to force confessions of sinful unbelief, the transgender Inquisition employs sanitised modern-day torture techniques such as social and political exile, financial ruin, jail, and of course the terrifying threat of removing one's children," close quote. Councillor Deeming, we accept questions from all parts of our community as part of question time at ordinary meetings of council, but we don't accept transphobia here in Moonee Valley. And as a city, we stand with our trans community, as we stand with our lesbian, gay, bisexual, intersex, queer, asexual and questioning communities. So Councillor Deeming, should you have any questions specific to the city of Moonee Valley, I'm more than happy for you to get in touch through your mayor or through my direct email address. Councillors, that concludes my answer to Councillor Deeming's question. Item 10.1 on the agenda. Item 10.1 on the agenda is response to Notice of Motion 2021/01, Council's planning process, solar panels in heritage overlays. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Mayor, I'd like to move that Council resolves to defer the motion to the 27th of July 2021 Council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Look, I will just briefly, Mayor, just perhaps to give officers an indication of why it is that I'm seeking a deferral, because I'm hoping to have some further discussions with officers to seek some clarification on a few matters. So I'll just speak to the matter briefly and very much welcome the recommendation that's made by officers to waive the fee, the permit fee. But I do have a question, and there was some late information today around, but I just haven't had a quite chance to absorb all of that and work through it. But there's a question about whether we're charging the $160 to residents to seek advice on whether or not they need a permit. And so if we're waiving a fee for a permit, are we also charging $150 for advice? So I just want some clarity around that. And secondly, the report is silent on what barriers might exist within the assessment, within our own assessment as to what then is approved or what is acceptable. So if you have to seek a permit, what are we going to approve? And the planning scheme at clause 5907 talks about whether or not the proposal meets any relevant local heritage policy. So one of the decision guidelines around whether kennels would be allowed is what our local heritage policy says. But the report is silent on what our local heritage policy says and whether or not this does in fact present as a barrier and what options there might be for us to review that, if any options. So they're the things that I want to seek some further advice on from officers prior to making a decision on a response to the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor.
Oh, and Mayor, sorry, if I could also just say thank you for your comments just now.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, wish to speak? Any other councillor wish to speak? As no one has spoken, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.2 is response to notice of motion 2021/08 dog parks. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
I'd like to move an alternative motion, Mayor.
Yes, yeah, sorry, please present it.
The alternative being that Council resolves A, to note the report assessing sites for an enclosed off-leash dog park in Ascot Vale, Flemington and or Travancore. B, note that the use of the land at 28 to 68 Flemington Street has not been subject to community consultation, and if the state government is willing to lease the land to Council, may be preferred for alternative open space use by the wider community. C, to continue to explore options for fenced dog off-leash areas, shared use in brackets, in 1, Ascot Vale, in brackets with further consideration given to Fairburn Park, close brackets, 2, Travancore, brackets, reporting back on the feasibility of completing fencing around the existing dog park for shared use as a potential alternative to 28 to 68 Flemington Street, close brackets, 3, Moonee Ponds, then in brackets with consideration for the potential of future master plans or development plans and applications to provide for fenced dog off-leash areas, close brackets, and then 4, other areas of the municipality where appropriate land is available, and D, request the Chief Executive Officer update Council if future opportunities arise for pursuing any of these options through state government grants, master plans or future Council budget processes.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. And again, I'd just like to thank the officers for such a informative and comprehensive report in response to the notice of motion that I brought either earlier this year or late last year. I was particularly interested to read about the 3 categorisations of types of dog parks and that there are currently no existing fenced dog off-leash areas in Moonee Valley, which is something that I wasn't aware of and something that I'm hoping that colleagues are keen to address. Master plans for 3 sports grounds do foreshadow the introduction of off-leash shared areas, noting a trial period in consultation would be needed. But I have to say I've got some reservations about that. Reservations about the use of sports ground as shared off-leash fenced areas due to a conflict with user groups, either sporting clubs or with young children who are out having a kick of the footy, and that being in conflict then with dogs off-leash. It just seems to me to be potentially asking for some difficulties. I've also have reservations about proposing a fence around Walter Street Reserve, which is a lovely open space area without a fence around the oval at the moment, and I'm just not sure what that would add to the open space landscape. The maps on page 7 and 12 of the attachment to the report make a few things really clear though. Firstly, the lack of dog facilities in Moonee Ponds, which I hadn't actually asked about originally. And secondly, that the recommendation of Walter Street Reserve and the state government land are very proximate to existing parks at Fairburn and Travancore. So with respect to the state government land in Travancore, there's been no response to an inquiry from Council for 10 months, and I'm just not that patient. Secondly, it's right close to an existing dog park, and I think that having two open space for dogs in that close proximity is not necessarily, to me, a very equitable use of open space. There are potentially, as I put in the motion, potentially after consultation there might be some other uses for that space that the community might support. And I'm actually also not sure that the proposed portion of that land is 2,000 square metres, not that I've got out with a tape measure. So drawing on the information in the report and also on some emails that I've received from people both in Moonee Ponds and people who use the Travancore Dog Park and people in other parts of the municipality, I'm putting forward this slight alternative. And the alternative thanks officers for the report and notes the report. But also, secondly, notes the lack of consultation around the state government land and that there might be potentially preferred uses. Thirdly, makes use of, or potentially makes use of an existing dog park that's already virtually enclosed, and that's the Travancore Dog Park, which actually doesn't have that much of a perimeter that isn't enclosed. The whole perimeter along the Moonee Ponds Creek is already a fence, and the other fence is just post and rail without the enclosure. So I've had some emails about whether that's possibly, could possibly be looked at as our one and only shared use fenced dog park in the municipality. It already is a dog park, so would reduce any controversy around that. So that point there seeks some feasibility study around how that might work. Including costs, I'm assuming. Fourthly, in Moonee Ponds, looking at small spaces, potentially New York-style spaces for people in apartments, and I've had some emails about that, and whether that could be part of master plans or part of development plans, and also other areas of the municipality, which I didn't have in the original notice of motion, but want to make sure that other areas of the municipality are in front of mind for state grants. Just also with respect to Travancore, and I'll just speak briefly now rather than afterwards, it is also next to the hockey pitch, and if we are going to be upgrading the hockey pitch, I'm very keen to make sure dogs no longer use the hockey pitch, and if the Travancore Park is enclosed, that will hopefully get dogs off the hockey pitch, and also might slow bikes down in the area. So I'll be interested to see whether colleagues have any questions or feedback around that, and hope for your support moving forward on that particular issue.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think Councillor Isa's covered it pretty comprehensively. I think it was a really interesting read, the report, and thanks to officers. The proposed alternative, I think, offers us a bit more of a structured way forward with what we should do with the next steps and that hard work that was put into the report. So happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Isa, for putting forward this alternative. I too really did like the report in regards to what was the original notice of motion. Obviously, the notice of motion was based down in Ascot Vale, Flemington and Travancore, and I'm really glad that with point C you put in point 4 being other areas of the municipality where appropriate land is available. So for people who are watching online or will get feedback on this, we aren't focusing just on dog parks at one end of the municipality. We know that there's dogs all over the municipality, and in terms of when we apply for, there's future opportunities arising through government grants, we will have a lot of different ones that could potentially be put forward. We know that we've got lots of dogs, and we probably really eventually need to get to the stage where we have a dog park per neighbourhood, but it'll take us a while to get there. I completely understand that, but we love Alf Pierce, and we'll love the new one in West Essendon, and hopefully we can get a few more going over this council term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Isa, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Report 10.3 is response to petition Beautify North Street, Ascot Vale. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa?
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with one very small amendment, and if it's okay, I might just read the amendment, or
Yes,
would
yep,
you like me to read
yep.
the...
No, that's fine.
So the amendment is just a slight change to point 2. So I'll just read point 2 for clarity. To plant 30 new trees in available tree planting locations as part of the 2022 street tree planting program, utilising the existing species allocation for this street of Queensland brush box, Callistemon Kings Park Special, and to discuss the species of the final 3 trees with the lead petitioner, given concerns expressed about plane trees.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Isa, do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks very much to the people of North Street who have brought forward requests for some more trees in the street, and it's really pleasing to be able to put forward the proposal of planting 30 new trees in the street. That includes 20 new trees and just 10 trees being replaced, trees that have been identified as being in poor condition. As I learnt last night on the Ascot Vale Good Karma network on Facebook, I didn't learn it, it was reinforced to me, the species of trees can be very controversial, and people are very passionate about trees, species, which is terrific, and it was great to see people really caring about what types of trees we do plant in Moonee Valley. So the officers who do get out there and plant the trees, please know that your work is noticed and appreciated. But there was a very animated discussion about plane trees and some concern about more plane trees being planted in Moonee Valley. So while plane trees was a species suggested by the petitioner, just asking if we might go back to the petitioner and, in light of perhaps the wider community views that are expressed about plane trees, just have some discussions about whether there's potentially an alternative species that we could compromise on there. Otherwise, look forward to seeing some new trees, and hope next year's weather is as wet as this year's to be able to sustain the new growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, wish to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, it's really great to see this report come back.
Councillor Hodgson, maybe your microphone.
Sorry.
Yes.
Really great to see this report come back with the great recommendations of increasing our tree canopy. And thank you to the residents for bringing it to us. I note that there's a recommendation to install 2 low-level garden beds, but the report does detail the difficulties with the median strip there, and I know the petition did mention, some underplanting hopefully for the median strips, which hasn't formed part of the officer's recommendation given the lack of irrigation through the centre median. But I would draw the attention of those residents to our nature strip planting policy, which may be something you'd like to consider if you did want to take ownership of the centre median and do some of that underplanting and watering yourself. I think that would be something really wonderful for that stretch of North Street.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? No? Councillor, sorry, he was itching his ear. I thought his hand was up. Councillor Isa, do you wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Councillors, item 10.4 on the agenda is Community Grants Review. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to move the officer's recommendation with a slight amendment to remove the point D from the motion.
And then have the existing point E to be
Existing point E be replaced with point D,
D.
yes.
Thank you. Councillors, the motion is on the screen as well. If you need clarification, deletion of D, and therefore E becomes D. Seconded, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Hodgson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Sorry, Mayor, my light is on the wrong side. I just wanted to again thank officers for this report. It's a really wonderful report. I think it's a great outcome for Moonee Valley. Last year we were able to really quickly pivot and provide additional grants for COVID recovery for our community, and through that able to support our community groups, business and artists through a really difficult time. So I thank the previous council for that decision. The review and the input from our members of our community has given us a set of really great recommendations and a great range of ways to continue to support the community through the next phase of the pandemic. And that means having rounds of small, fast grants that can be really responsive to immediate needs, and also returning to some of our larger community grants in a biannual grants application round. So the officers have demonstrated how the transitional model of some of those sort of more COVID-focused grants, but also the return to community and partnership grants, will allow us to cater for moving through the things that our community needs from us, but also staying flexible so that we can be responsive to whatever comes at us next. There's also a new grant stream available for climate action projects, which is a direct result of the community engagement in the grants review. So thank you to all the members of the community who gave that really clear message. There's also a new grants assessment committee, which is a really positive step forward and a response to an independent review and feedback from the community that you'd like to see greater transparency in our decision making. We'll always look to continuously improve the process, and I think there's some recommendations in there as well about how we can make sure the application process is very accessible and simple and easy for members of our community to seek the things that they need from us. So I'm really happy to support this, and thanks to the officers for all of the hard work and to our community members for participating in that engagement process to let us know what you need and how we can support you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I concur with my colleague, the Deputy Mayor, that this grant system that we have now is probably just right. When we first introduced this, we had a couple of teething problems, but we've been tweaking it, and I think right now we're capturing everyone who applies for a grant and it gets assessed equally and cohesively within this system. So once again, thank you to the officers, thank you to the CEO. This is a great outcome for the community, and I think overall it's been a good program.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Isa.
Just to reiterate Councillor Hodgson's comment around the climate action grants. It's a great new inclusion and really responds to the investment that many active community groups are making across Moonee Valley to try to help give us a climate safe future, and it's wonderful that that's been picked up and incorporated into the grants program.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. So one of my issues previously with the grants is that when we came up with this big grant project, it was really difficult to get it exactly right. We didn't really know what we were dealing with COVID, and we have, as Councillor Sypek said, been able to tweak things slightly. This is a bit more than a tweak. There's quite a few changes, and it did need to happen. But one thing that I do find really hard with grants is for our businesses that, or community groups that work so hard and miss out, and that will still happen. And I know that in the height of COVID, hopefully we don't reach another peak, but there were a lot of businesses that were really disappointed when they missed out on grants. We can't unfortunately do everything to support every single business, but we are trying. Hopefully with slightly less amounts, we can hit more businesses. And I think that's what this is trying to achieve. But I absolutely hear the businesses that have missed out and would urge them to reapply again. It is slightly different. And that we are doing our best. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Hodgson, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Report 10.5 on the agenda is response to petition Holyrood Avenue, Strathmore. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will, Mayor. I'm mindful that I'm not one of the ward councillors, so I just need to bring it back up. But with this one, it started off as a petition for Holyrood Avenue, and there's basically been a lot of traffic studies done. So the petition was to prohibit the entry from Buller Road into Holyrood Avenue and implement speed humps or other similar speed reduction devices, reducing the speed limit to 30 kilometres an hour and prohibiting vehicles exceeding 6 metres from entering Holyrood Avenue. This is obviously people coming sort of off DFO down Buller Road and cutting through the streets. There were some changes that were made to Dublin and Balmoral, and Holyrood was obviously the next one. There's been a lot of traffic studies in regards to speeds and what's required and how many vehicles are actually this street can take. And what we're resolving here is to note the traffic volumes, the speed, the safety record, which was very, very good, and that they're below normal operating limits for local access street classification, and therefore the additional traffic interventions requested by petitioners are not warranted at this time. And we'll also let the lead petitioner know of council's decision on the matter. I'm happy to hear from obviously the ward councillors if they think otherwise. I can understand why this would be potentially contentious, but based on the traffic reports that we've received, I feel like going with the officer's recommendation is warranted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Tyson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Isa?
It's funny, I was reading this motion this report thinking this is sounding so familiar, having deja vu, and asked a council office if they could help me find a report that I could remember from back in 2009 where the same question was put to council, and sort of comparing the issues. It's the same issue that's obviously troubled residents and keeps coming back to council with similar data, that the traffic in the area doesn't necessarily reach those thresholds or those triggers for further action, and those same concerns around, well, if one street is closed, what that might mean for the other 3 streets that haven't been closed. And so I know obviously this is the fact that it's been around since 2009, if not before. Obviously this is a concern for residents in the area, and it may be that there are some other traffic treatments or some other more creative options that might be able to be explored. But the data, it's interesting, the data of the numbers of vehicles just has not budged over, what are we at, 13 years or 14 years. So there just doesn't seem to be, as I say, those thresholds being reached for change. So maybe, I don't know if, obviously I'm not a ward councillor either, so I don't know if ward councillors have had conversations with residents to see if there might be some other options, but I support the officer's recommendation at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was here when this all originally started, And what happened is when DFO first opened up, there was a parking problem. There wasn't any parking at DFO. So the people used to park all the way through DFO, and it was so popular that it started parking in Dublin Street and in all the other streets. And the residents of Dublin Street originally put up a motion to council to block off Dublin Street and make it a parking permit zone and to stop people from parking within the street. And it was a parking problem originally, not a traffic problem, if you remember quite well, Councillor Isa. And then what happened is it migrated to the next street, obviously, and then to the next street. And every time it migrated and metamorphosised itself, we knew that eventually this was going to get down to Woodland Street. But somehow it went from a parking problem to a traffic problem. But we never envisaged that it was a traffic problem because there was always traffic and cut through those streets. It was always going to happen. What exacerbated it all is when they had parking on both sides when the DFO first opened up. But now that problem of parking on both sides has disappeared, the traffic count is pretty much still the same. And the figures that we've got here actually pretty much say exactly the same. So without the parking problem, it's pretty much as it was before DFO came. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Sharp?
Thank you, Mayor. I understand the rationale behind the officer's recommendation in this report. I guess for the last 18 months or so, or for the last 6 months, the road's been open, but previously, prior to that, I think we were doing works in Buller Road for new drainage along there that got held up, and I think it ended up being about 18 months, where all those streets off Buller Road were blocked off because of the works that were being done along Buller Road. So the residents down there certainly noticed a big change in the traffic, obviously, because no traffic at all could get down there. Not only Holyrood, but Windsor and a couple of the others as well. So having the road opened again has obviously allowed traffic to flow down those streets. Noting in the 18 months when the roads were closed, it didn't really have that much of an effect on Buller Road. I must say that, and I certainly didn't have any complaints about the roads being closed from anybody. So I think we probably need to take a more holistic look at this and noting, if we close one road, it's only going to go to the next street. That's just a given. Any traffic is only going to move on. But considering the 18 months or so when these roads all off Buller Road were closed because of the works being done, having not much of an impact, I'd be certainly open to having a look more holistically and shutting all the roads down there rather than just one. I don't think we can look at just one. I think we need to look at all. So I'll have a good think about that and see what we can potentially do in the future. But taking this report on board, I certainly understand the rationale behind it.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Byrne, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for your input. Thank you, Councillor Sypek, for the background history in regards to the parking. That made perfect sense in terms of what you were saying with DFO. As Councillor Sharp, you mentioned you close off one street, it just pushes it down, and I think that's exactly what will happen. The problem is whilst it may not get busier on Buller Road as such, I'm very mindful that keep pushing it down will end up at that North Essendon roundabout, which we've actually spent a lot of time advocating to fix because it can be a nightmare. So I'm not sure if we necessarily want to be pushing, I suppose people could go down Woodland Street, but then, that would get complaints as well. But it's one of those things that we can keep looking at. It's come to us many times before, and it will potentially come again. And if traffic conditions do change, obviously reports will change and decisions can be made in that. But in light of what the report we have in front of us and the numbers that we have in front of us, I'm comfortable with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Isaac, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Tyson. Those against? Councillor Adams, Councillor Sharp. That motion is carried. Report 10.6 is response to petition parking issues in Groves Street, Keilor East. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Tyson.
Mayor, can I move the officer's recommendation with an amended point B?
Yes.
So to read, note the prevalence of illegal parking on Grove Street within 10 metres of the Miliara Road intersection, warranting the installation of no stopping signage at approximately 14 metres from the intersection of Miliara Road to improve safety and access for residents.
Thank you. Do you want to just double check on the screen if that is as you have read?
Yeah, that's correct.
Perfect. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Tyson, you wish to speak to the motion?
So the petition was, as the title states, parking issues in Grove Street, East Keilor. So we've undertaken an assessment of the site, and there are issues not with any sort of road rules or signs, but just people, motorists not reading the signs. So hence installing the stopping sign. And my amendment was just to fix up grammar.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I totally agree with this petition. If you make a right-hand turn from Miliara Road into Grove Street, it's pretty risque with the oncoming traffic. And if you've got a car parked right at the entrance and another car is trying to come out of Grove Street, you just have to wait until there's room on the other side of the road to get past that parked car, which is virtually abutting Miliara Road. So it's a very, very dangerous situation, and I totally agree that the parking should be at least 10 to 14 metres back from Miliara Road on that side. Not only is it this street, but if you go up a little bit further, Saltu Street is exactly the same. You make a right-hand turn into Saltu Street, and if you've got a car parked right on the edge of Saltu and Miliara Road, it becomes a very, very dangerous situation with oncoming traffic. So totally agree with this petition. I think our traffic officers maybe should just have a look at those two streets in particular as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Tyson, wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 10.7 is printing contract extension. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Tyson.
I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Tyson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Exactly what it says, extension of contract. And this is just to do with our panel, so essentially getting the best bang for buck.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Bedio.
Nothing further to add.
Any other councillor wish to speak? Technically, Councillor Bedio spoke. Would you like to close, Councillor Tyson?
No.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? No. All those in favour? Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Isaac, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Tyson. Those against? Councillor Sypek. That motion is carried. Councillors, the next report is 10.8, and as I've declared a conflict of interest in this item, I'll invite Deputy Mayor Councillor Hodgson to temporarily take the chair. Those councillors who have also declared a conflict will need to leave the chambers.
Thank you, Mayor. The next item on the agenda is 33 Dean Street, Moonee Ponds, and apologies, I don't have the agenda in front of me with the full, here we go. 33 Dean Street, Moonee Ponds, Moonee Valley Racecourse, use and development of a multi-storey building containing dwellings, offices, a food and drink premises, including buildings and works with an environmental significance overlay Schedule 2. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with two amendments, please, Mayor. And including a point N, so 1N, the deletion of note junction from public to private road, close quotations, on TP 01.04, and then the inclusion of 1O, the building to provide a setback of at least 5 metres for the first 20 metres in height and a further 5 metre setback to building elements above 20 metres in height, to comply with clause 5.9/4 of Schedule 1 to the activity centre zone. Sorry, Mayor, I just want, can I just ask the planner a question just to check something about that?
Sorry?
Does it need to say provide a setback of at least 5 metres, etc., from Kenneth Street?
Apologies.
Yeah. Sorry. Look, I'll move it as it is, if you'd prefer, and perhaps I can just clarify
yes,
that.
I think without a motion on the floor, I'm not sure if we can have a point of clarification, or can we seek a through governance? Through the CEO. Okay, so we just point of clarification through the CEO as to whether we need to clarify setback from Kenneth Street.
Or some other words there. I'm just aware that it doesn't say which element of the building we're requesting is setback.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Through the chair, I will refer that to Manager Planning and Building to respond.
Sorry, Mr. Barry, just ask you to turn the microphone on, the little grey button a bit higher. Yep.
Perhaps to make it clearer, it could perhaps state from the southern boundary or from the Kenneth Street boundary to make it more clearer.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Thank you, CEO. Councillor Isa, your motion.
Sorry, I'll just read point O again, and I do apologise. I just want to make sure that we don't have something that's ambiguous. So the building to provide a setback from the southern boundary at Kenneth Street of at least 5 metres for the first 20 metres in height, and a further 5 metre setback to building elements above 20 metres, etc.
Thank you, Councillor Isa, and confirming for governance, Kenneth Street is spelt Kenna. Can we just confirm, Councillor Isa, that the motion is as read on the screen? Yep.
Oh, yes, I can double check that. I can't actually see it very well. So,
Did you? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Councillors, do I have a seconder? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor, and I do apologise to my colleagues for that. I just wanted to make sure that we were as clear as possible. So this 11-storey mixed-use building with 130 apartments is another stage of the Moonee Valley Racecourse development, which is governed by the schedule, and the schedule and planning that on which this is based has taken place over many years, establishing the expectations and limitations for the development on the site. So importantly, I'm not arguing against the intensification and density of development, but that doesn't mean that every design that's put forward to us will pass the test. The schedule is very clear, and we also helpfully have an applicable VCAT decision as further guidance as to the application of the schedule. With the height at 36.8 metres, the northern section is a floor too high. However, the nature of the preferred heights is such that this is permitted with a clear demonstration of net community benefit. Now, the net community benefit hasn't been clearly or specifically demonstrated, which is a frustrating consequence of the staggered approach to the different stages of the development on the site. But in the VCAT decision, at paragraph 66, there was clear approval of this degree of encroachment on the preferred height, and it would be very difficult for us to now contest that height. More significantly, though, the proposal does not meet the required setbacks. The building should be set back at the southern edge at Kenneth Street by 5 metres, and then after 20 metres, which is the equivalent of 6 storeys, it should be set back another 5 metres. Now, I just do need to ask another point of clarification here, if I may, Deputy Mayor. So I might just, if my time could be stopped.
Sure thing. So we have a point of clarification on the floor. Councillor Isa,
sorry, through you, Deputy Mayor. Page 81 and 93 of the report says that the setbacks don't apply because Kenneth Street is a private road. Now, we've had other advice that Kenneth Street is a public road, and I just would like to be clarified for those listening at home in particular as to whether Kenneth Street is being considered as a public road or a private road.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. So your point of clarification seeking that the references in the report on page 83 and 94?
81 and 93 in the document I was looking at, unless I was looking at a...
No, that's fine. Where they refer to Kenneth Street as a private road, seeking clarification of whether Kenneth Street is a public road. Is that correct? Through the CEO.
Thank you, through the chair. I refer to the manager planning building to respond.
Just checking my page numbering, if that's 81. Yep, 81. Yep. Would you like me to show him? Would that hurry things up?
Acting Mayor, can I maybe propose through you a short 5-minute break if required?
Through the CEO, would we like to seek adjourn? Yep, I'm happy to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes while we seek clarification and a response to Councillor Isa's question. Thank you everyone for your patience. Apologies for that delay. So we had a point of clarification from Councillor Isa seeking clarity in the report at item 10.8 on page 81 and 93 to references of the extension of Kenneth Street as a private road. Through the CEO for response.
Thank you, Chair. I'll refer the question to Manager Planning and Building. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The question in relation to whether Kenneth Street is a private or a public road, and the reference by VCAT in the previous decision, relates to the fact officers believe that the road at that stage, Kenneth Street, wasn't indicated as a confirmed road to go through, as a public road, so it was an interim arrangement, and that may have been the reason why it was referred to as a private road by VCAT. It is confirmed that this development and the developers as part of this stage will be building this component of Kenneth Street, because it will become a public road, handed over to council, and it will connect with the rest of the road network. And that's the way that the design of the road network has been done, that Kenneth Street has to become a through road and a public road. So it is not a private road, it is a public road. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Barry and CEO. Councillor Isa, does that answer your point of clarification? Thank you. We'll return to Councillor Isa speaking on the motion.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor, and I do apologise for the adjournment, but it is quite an important point, because one of the justifications for not having the setbacks was put that because it was a private road, it didn't need to have these setbacks. And thank you very much for clarifying that in the future the intention is that it be a public road, and therefore these setbacks that are set out in the schedule ought apply, which is the amendment that I've moved to the officer's recommendation. Now, it has also been put that these setbacks are guidance only, that they're not things that we should take so literally. However, VCAT did make clear at paragraph 67 that, and I'm reading here from the previous VCAT decision, that we agree with Council that the Activity Centre Zone 1 provides clear direction as to the built form and setbacks within Precinct 9 and sub-precincts. And I think the phrase clear direction means more than just guidance. Again, at paragraph 75, paragraph 75 is the one that tripped us all up with this reference to Kenneth Street being a private road, and so thank you for that clarification. But even within the discussion of it being perhaps an interim private road, VCAT did comment that despite it being a private road, they weren't actually satisfied with the extensive overshadowing and the amenity for pedestrians walking down the road. Now, they were saying that with respect to Building 2, which was the focus of most of VCAT's decision, but the point is that even with it being a private road, VCAT felt that the pedestrian amenity, the overshadowing, the potential wind impacts, that all of these points were critical to whether this is going to work for the future residents of the development. And Mayor, as Deputy Mayor, could I just seek an extension of time to make one last point, if I may?
Yeah, sure. One more minute.
Thank you. The point is that VCAT actually doesn't specifically mention Building 1 interface to Kenneth Street, but it certainly doesn't say that it's okay. It's actually silent on that particular interface, and in the absence of any other reason to ignore that setback, I am very strongly of the belief that council ought to enforce the setback which has been in the activity centre zone and known to the applicant and known to everyone involved in this for the 4 or 5 years that this has been under some discussion. VCAT was very concerned about amenity for pedestrians overshadowing of the roadway. It also commented at paragraph 105 that Kenneth Street is an important interconnecting street, and at paragraph 117 that it's critical to ensure pedestrian amenity. There is a complete absence of any support in the VCAT decision to disregard the setbacks. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Tyson, would you like to speak to the motion?
I think Councillor Isa's covered it quite well, and I think the point about guidelines is a particularly poignant one, and one that I agree with in seconding this motion. This is not to take away from the development as a whole. I think this is a fantastic compromise position over many years, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next stages of these developments. We'll see what the applicant has to say and where we're going with future developments. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd probably just like to, at this point, foreshadow that I will be moving the officer's recommendation if this motion doesn't pass. I think on the whole, this proposal is a much better position than what we were at, or where we found ourselves last year with the initial proposal from the developer. Whilst I agree that the setback's not ideal on Kenneth Street, I think overall the development is quite good, and so does our officers. This is an important part of the development that will lead on to the remaining redevelopment of the racecourse and the development of the residential developments in this part of the racecourse. I'm not comfortable in turning down this application based on the setback alone. I would like to and encourage the developer to take note of the setback guidelines for future developments, but for that I can't support this amendment, and would like to foreshadow that I'll be moving the officer's recommendation if this motion doesn't pass.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion, to the item? Councillor Isa, would you like to reply?
Oh, thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Look, I appreciate that a lot of work's gone into this particular proposal, that it has a lot to commend it, and it's the first of many particular stages of the development. As I said at the outset, I'm not arguing against the intensity of development on site. The only amendment being put forward is around setbacks, which we deferred 3 weeks ago to give the applicant an opportunity to respond to this very point, and I was a bit disappointed that there wasn't a response forthcoming to deal with what we flagged was a significant concern. There are the appropriate density of this site through the original planning process was established through tools and controls such as the setbacks, the heights, originally there was a request for a greater density, and this was pared back to a smaller density that the site could cope with, and these tools about setbacks and heights are the way that density is controlled. VCAT itself, and this is the final point I'll make, is that in the decision previously, VCAT did say that if these controls are disregarded, the appropriate disregarded, the community benefit of the overall development cannot be achieved. And I'll just read this paragraph. VCAT said, "We find that there is sound strategic context for the built form and other requirements of the activity centre zone, which does not support a significant departure from the objectives and requirements. A departure will not achieve net community benefit." And that is the reason for sticking with the setbacks, to ensure that that net community benefit for the whole site can eventually be achieved.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Tyson, and those against? Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio. That vote is carried. Thank you very much. I'll now invite the Mayor to return to the Chair and our other councillor colleagues.
Someone sort the other two councillors? Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I'll now resume the chair as we move to item 11.1, notices of motion. And councillors, we have 3 notices of motions on the agenda tonight. Item 11.1 is notice of motion 2021-21, underutilised open space in Rosehill Ward. I call on Councillor Byrne to present her notice of motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council resolves to receive a report back to Council within 6 months identifying unused or vacant land over 500 square metres in the Rosehill Ward that could be activated for community use as open space, community gardens, environmental outcomes, brackets such as tree canopy cover, closed bracket, or any other MV 2040 key objectives, and be considered for future grant funding streams. The report is to take into account land owned or managed by council or other agencies, including the state or federal government.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. This is obviously a notice of motion to really get the ball rolling in this space. Up in Rosehill Ward, we have what I consider quite a few vacant blocks of land that seem to just sit there, that no one really knows what is going on with them. I think we need to have a plan going forward. Our open space is so valuable, and we're lucky in Rosehill Ward that we do have bits and pieces scattered across the suburbs. So ideally we'll get this report back and then we can really digest what this land is for. My hope is that there will be some that we can convert into a variety of different things. Could even be, and obviously going out for community consultation, potentially down the track as well. But I don't want to delve too much into what's going to happen in 6 months' time. This is purely just to get the report back to see how many of these particular blocks of land we have and whereabouts in the city they are. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Tyson, I'd like to speak to the motion.
I'd like to thank Councillor Byrne for putting this notice of motion up. I think it's something that is really unique to our area in that when Walter Burley Griffin designed a lot of Keilor East, there were these open spaces put in. And as much as I absolutely want to retain these for green and community space, and, you know, we're not talking about developing them or anything like that, it's something that a lot of residents have really mentioned to me, all of the neighbours, where there's, I know probably at least a dozen cases where residents have abutting these spaces in Keilor East have mentioned snakes, all sorts of unpleasant wildlife and lack of use of the space in any way. So I think it's a great motion and I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Byrne, for bringing this up, because this comes up every once in a while within the Rosehill ward, and every time we hopefully get one new space utilised by a group. If you have a look at the Avondale Heights Community Garden, the East Keilor Community Garden, and even Holloway House, which is an aged care facility just behind Milliara Mall, they were all Burley Griffith properties which we as council have been reutilised in really good opportunities. Like the aged care facility is a fantastic one, because it was originally started by Rotary, and now it's one of the best facilities within the Moonee Valley area. I look forward to seeing what can be done in this area. Maybe an off-leash dog park in one of them wouldn't go astray, because you've got fences right around the whole place. I've been involved in talks where a lot of residents on the smaller parcels were all trying to buy the land behind, but then there was community consultation and some of the community wanted to keep it as open space. So I look forward to the report. I look forward to seeing what are the options now, seeing whether communities' minds have changed about this, or whether they still want to keep it as open space. Don't know, but looking forward to the report.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Byrne. I think it's really great. Our residents and community have been really clear on how valuable our public open space is, and I think anything that we can be doing to be strategic and maximising the opportunities that that space presents for our residents is something that's well worth supporting. I understand, I think, the unique situations that Rosehill faces, so happy to support kicking off that now, but I do think that a strategic look at all of our open space and how to look at that to maximise the opportunities that people have to access green space near their homes is definitely, hopefully, a next step that we can take after we address these issues that Rosehill's facing.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, Councillor Byrne, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 11.2 is Notice of Motion 2021-22 Open Space Projects. I'll call on Councillor Adams to present her Notice of Motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that Council resolves to receive a report with a view to ensuring adequate capital investment into Moonee Valley's open spaces by the end of September 2021, detailing projects and associated capital expenditure on Council's open spaces categorised by type, including but not limited to playgrounds, informal activity spaces such as half courts and hit-up walls, constructed wetlands, passive recreation space, landscaping and gardens, sporting fields. The report is to detail historical project expenditure from 2018 to 2021 and planned expenditure currently in Council's long-term capital works plan to 2024, covering new works as well as renewal of spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. I have a seconder for that motion, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to your Notice of Motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Following on from Councillor Byrne's motion, our open spaces are more important than ever to our community's health and wellbeing, and I'd like to see substantial investment in making our open spaces as functional and beautiful as they can be. I'm looking forward to reading the findings of this report, as I think it's important that we break down the proportion of our spend across these categories. We have so many master plans that I think we would all love to see realised, and with our council plan being finalised in the coming months, I'm hoping that investment in our open spaces is placed as a priority. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to the motion? Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Adams, for bringing this. I think in our budget meeting, or the meeting where we passed the budget recently, I spoke about striking balance in our budget, and I think this report, I hope, will give us a sense of, you know, whether balance has been struck or whether we can find some improvements in the way that we spend in our open space.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor? Councillor Isa.
Just interesting to reflect on the motion, the notices of motion tonight, all being about open space. And as part of the engagement, the community consultation on the community vision and council plan, open space and the use of open space and the importance of open space to community members has been mentioned in, I think, every conversation that I've been a part of. So I think it's no coincidence that that's something that's important to councillors, important to our community, and obviously having a bit of an audit on the investment that we're putting into that space and in what types of streams we're making that investment. It gives us really valuable information to know how we then make sure that we fill any gaps in the future. So thanks for putting that forward, Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Adams, for putting forward this notice of motion. I'm really excited to see what it comes back with. I think that the leisure activities within our city are extremely important. In terms of how much we actually spend on them, I feel like they're not, historically they haven't necessarily been the politically popular things to invest money in. We often don't get petitions about let's have half courts and hit up walls and wetlands and playgrounds. But I really do think that over COVID times, people have really appreciated council investing in these areas. And in terms of our overall budget, if we could increase that slightly, it could actually have a really big impact for the leisure in the city of Moonee Valley. So I'm looking forward to seeing how much. I hope we're not too disappointed when it comes back and says we really haven't spent anywhere near enough, but we know that as a council we can obviously increase that going forward. So it'll be great to see. So good. Well done, Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak? If not, Councillor Adams, would you like to close?
Only just to say thank you to my fellow councillors for your comments, because I obviously agree, and looking forward to receiving the report. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Adams. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 11.3 is Notice of Motion 2021/23, Signs in the Public Use Zone. I call on Councillor Isa to present her Notice of Motion.
Thank you, Mayor, for our third notice of motion on open space. I'd like to move that Council resolves to A, request that the Chief Executive Officer bring a report to Council by the end of September 2021 that 1, clarifies the planning scheme requirements for the lawful display of signs in public parks and recreation zone, and recreation zone and public use zone, and 2, provides short and longer term options to support the reasonable display of sponsorship signage which assists clubs to maintain financial sustainability while also prioritising safety and amenity in open space reserves. B, note that the Council resolution of the 23rd of July 2019 and the moratorium on the removal of unlawful signs in open space reserves is no longer valid as the Department has refused Planning Scheme Amendment C203 Moon. And C, note that enforcement of the planning scheme requirements with respect to signage in public park and recreation zone and public use zone is an operational matter to be managed by council officers.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Our parks are generally multi-purpose spaces for not only organised sport but also informal recreation activity, and as such are shared and enjoyed by all members of our community. The expectations on these multi-shed spaces are vastly different. Sports clubs often rely on sponsorship signage as a mechanism for financial viability and therefore expect to be able to have signage visible during the season. Our community also has high expectations on how open spaces should look and feel, and balancing these competing expectations is an ongoing challenge. The planning scheme regulates signage, including on parkland. Sports grounds are usually in the public park and recreation zone. Signs in this zone are Category 4 use per clause 5205 in the planning scheme, meaning that most signs at sports clubs are prohibited. Although there are some possibilities for temporary signs without permits for events and matches, and floodlit signs require a permit but can be improved. In 2019, Council wanted to provide further scope for sports clubs to have more signage than the planning scheme allows. So Amendment 203, C203 Moonee was lodged to change land for the purposes of signage from Category 4 to Category 2 and to allow permits for signs to be applied via Vic Smart processes. At the same time, Council also placed a moratorium on the removal of unlawful signs, excluding where Council identifies safety concerns, and the amendment was processed. The relevant department advised that the proposed amendment required further review, including the preparation of guidelines and further auditing, and then subsequently refused the amendment in late 2020. With the proposed amendment refused, the moratorium has now lapsed, and as the moratorium was explicitly linked to the amendment process. Officers have undertaken signage audits in 2019 and in 2021 during the summer and winter seasons. The original 2019 audits informed the proposed planning scheme amendment and were quite simple. The 2021 audits were conducted to assist officers in gathering information to respond to the feedback and were much more thorough. For both the 2021 summer and winter audits, a total of 47 venues were visited, 19 seasonal licensed uses, 28 leased facilities. Initial findings are that in the 2019 audit, 6 venues had no signage, and in summer 2021, the same 6 venues had 133 signs. Notably, Fairbairn Park has 82, whereas previously there were none. For the winter of 2021, there was a sharp increase at Cross Keys, which jumped from 13 to 130 signs, and Strathnava from 19 to 63. 86 signs were found to be facing towards residential zone within 30 metres. A reasonable amount of signage at grounds to support clubs is recognised as important. However, it has reached a point at some grounds where the lack of enforcement of the planning scheme has been intolerably exploited. Some clubs have done the right thing, and they are now disadvantaged compared to those who have gone too far. Officers have been reviewing options available for managing signage in sports grounds or public park zones. Officers are also seeking to establish appropriate ways of addressing recent concerns regarding new signs and how best to move forward with sporting clubs. This motion seeks a report that clarifies what is allowed, outlines possible options, and notes very clearly that the moratorium ended last year and that council officers have the authority to enforce the planning scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'd just add that as Councillor Isa's outlined and point B of the motion refers, there was a process put in place to try and create some clarity and assist clubs and other sporting clubs and other park users to understand what was and wasn't allowable. And I think when that planning amendment was refused, it left a bit of a gap in people's understandings of what could and couldn't be done, and what options there were in place to support clubs and bring them in line with the planning scheme. So I think this is a really great notice of motion to seek a bit more information and provide that indication to our park users and community sports clubs that we're working on a solution, that we want to be able to both support clubs in their financial sustainability and also support our community's enjoyment of those open spaces. So looking forward to a report. I think it's great that it will be coming quickly because there is, as I said, that uncertainty out there at the moment. And yeah, thank Councillor Isa for bringing this issue back to our attention.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I have to say, coming into this, I was very supportive of this motion on the basis that Councillor Isa is correct. Some clubs are taking the absolute mickey out of their signage, some of which were noted in Councillor Isa's comments. But I can't help but feel that in your closing remarks there, Councillor Isa, we're potentially opening our clubs up to some significant pain by essentially directing the officers to go out and enforce the scheme, which we know most of them are not currently in line with the scheme. But that being said, they haven't been for probably 100 years. I'm a little bit concerned that this is going to hurt a lot of clubs financially, and I would be much more okay with this motion if we were to put some form of moratorium in place until we got a report back. Now, I just want to put a question through you, Chair, through to an officer, and I believe it was probably Manager of Planning, I'm not sure, whether it would be possible to put a moratorium in place until such time as the report is tabled.
Through the CEO, would you be able to address that particular question?
Thank you, Mayor. I will refer this question to Acting Director, Strategy and Planning.
Through the Chair, it would be possible for Council.
Maybe possibly microphone. Thank you.
I think I'd know by now. Through the Mayor, it would be possible for councillors to consider developing a moratorium as part of the notice of motion tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Councillor Bedio, that answers your question.
It does, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
On that advice, I'd like to move an amendment to this motion. An amendment would read as Part D, or perhaps actually, no, sorry, under Section A, Part 3 of Section A, that a moratorium on the enforcement of the planning, would I be able to seek an adjournment to
Yes,
get
a motion
this?
in writing, absolutely. We will adjourn the meeting so a motion can be put in writing. Just wait till we're off air, please, councillors. We return to the council meeting of the 13th of July 2021. We're currently in item 11.3, which is Notice of Motion 2021/23, signs in the public use zone. At this stage, Councillor Isa as the mover had spoken, Councillor Hodgson as seconder, Councillor Bedio was mid-speaking and has put forward an amendment. Councillor Bedio, would you like to read your amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. My amendment adds an additional point 3 to section A, or part A of the motion, that states that a moratorium be placed on the planning enforcement of unlawful signs, excluding where council identifies safety and amenity concerns in public park and recreation zone and public use zones, managed by sporting clubs under the Planning and Environment Act 1987 until the report under A is tabled to council.
Thank you. Councillor Bedio. Do I have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to the specific amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. As I stated previously, whilst I do believe that some clubs are taking the mickey with their signage and using signage inappropriately, I feel the vast majority of clubs are doing the right thing, and they're doing the right thing by the community. And signage is a very important part of how clubs operate. It's an important enticement to get sponsors that they need. As you all probably know, clubs wouldn't be here without sponsorship. My concern is by noting the end of the moratorium, we're essentially allowing our officers to go out to every club in Moonee Valley, not just the ones that are on the extreme end of the spectrum, but the clubs that are trying to do the right thing and essentially, potentially send them broke by getting rid of all of their signs. Now, I would hope that if this amendment passes, that clubs still take this in good faith and don't abuse the moratorium. But I think it's the right thing to do, given that most clubs are doing the right thing. So I hope my colleagues can support me on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Sharp, wish to speak to the amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. I might note that the moratorium was placed on the removal of unlawful signs in open space reserves because the previous council understood the importance of these signs to our sporting clubs and to our local businesses. I note that the department didn't refuse our request to review the way signs are placed in our reserves because the request was inaccurate or irrelevant, but rather because of external factors including COVID. So I'll note advice from one of our officers. The Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning advised that the proposed amendment required further review, including the preparation of guidelines and further auditing of signs. Due to the advent of the pandemic and associated restrictions for both sporting clubs to use reserves and for officers to undertake auditing, however, it was considered appropriate to progress these activities when restrictions were more favourable, with Council being particularly mindful of the financial impact of the amendment on sporting clubs and the financial impact of the pandemic more broadly. Due to the delay, Dalwhoop subsequently refused the amendment in late 2020. The issue of signage in PPRZ and PUZ zonings is very complex and requires a full investigation and report, which I welcome in point A. For example, Montgomery Park Kindergarten and Essendon Traffic School are both located in PPRZ zonings. So effectively no signage would be allowed on our kindergartens or our traffic school if we proceeded to remove all signage in PPRZ land. It is imperative that we base any decision regarding this topic on factual and accurate information, and will only garner that information through a comprehensive report that is also informed through proper consultation with our clubs and lessees. On that note, I would like to, if I could, put up an amendment just in regards to consultation, which is what was requested back in 2019.
So, Councillor Sharp, at this stage we are considering Councillor Bedio's amendment, so we do need to deal with the Councillor Bedio's amendment before further amendments.
For another one?
Yes.
Okay, no problems. Well, I'll hold that then, because I think I've said in the chamber before, we should be making decisions based on all the information, and I certainly welcome getting that information based on the fact that this issue is extremely complex and doesn't just affect your standard footy club. It affects every club. As I said, we've got kinders on public PPRZ land, our Essendon Traffic School. There's numerous issues which could potentially be born from this proposal about signage. So I certainly welcome Councillor Bettio regarding the amendment for the moratorium. I think that is going to be vitally important, because it's no good going through the process of looking at ways, it says in point one regarding the report to come back in September. It's no good having that come back to us in September and potentially have the moratorium not in place, and effectively any club or organisation or community group on PPRZ land or PUZ land having to remove each and every sign because we haven't got our report tabled before us.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Isa?
Look, the original motion actually just states the state of play. The moratorium actually hasn't been in place since late 2020 when the amendment was refused. So the fact that officers haven't gone charging out and asked all clubs to remove their signs, I think has given an indication of the sensitivity that officers have with respect to this issue, and the enforcement mechanisms that they're and the way in which they've chosen to work with clubs to try to work out a reasonable time frame to try to roll this back. The points...
Sorry, Mayor, a point of clarification to the Manager of Statutory Planning.
Yes.
Through you, Mayor. Well, sorry, through to the CEO. Would the Manager of Statutory Planning's understanding of the substantive motion be that signs would need to be removed post this motion, if this motion was to get passed?
Councillor Bettio, from my understanding of your point of clarification, you're asking for an officer's opinion. A point of clarification has to only refer to fact.
Okay.
I'd remind councillors that given a notice of motion is not accompanied with a report, we cannot ask officers their opinion because there is no report. So I will not accept that point of clarification. Governance, Councillor Isa should be on 2 minutes 40 if we just juice it up to 3 minutes. There we go. Councillor Isa.
Mayor, could I just have a point of clarification as well?
Yes, Councillor Sophie.
The original application to the Planning Minister, was that refused or was that sent back to us for further investigation?
So, sorry, councillors, we're dealing with the amendment. So the questions, point of clarifications need to be relevant to the amendment.
I'm asking because Councillor Isa mentioned that it was refused. So I'm just asking for a point of clarification. Was it refused or was it sent back to us for further investigation?
So, CEO, actually, you can ask it of the original mover of the amendment, but however, that is Councillor Bettio. So again, I would like to deal with this amendment, and then when we get back to the substantive, we can ask that of Councillor Isa. Councillor Isa, you've got the call. You have 3 minutes.
Look, just in response to Councillor Sypek's question, there was a initial request for some further information, and then it was refused.
Okay. Oh no, it's Councillor Isa, it's still your time on speaking to the amendment. You've got 3 minutes. I gave you an extra 20 seconds. Because, sorry, Councillor Bettio...
No, I understood, sorry.
240, perfect.
So, the moratorium has not been in place. Council officers have not gone out and demanded that all signs have been removed. The signs have actually proliferated throughout the season. So I think the point is that councillors are not in charge of planning enforcement, officers are, and officers have demonstrated that the style with which they're going to enforce the particular planning scheme, which is sensitively and reasonably. What we have, though, is a situation where some clubs are taking an unreasonable approach to that, and we've got an inequitable playing field, and we need to make it very clear to all sporting clubs that we're way out of kilter, and we need to all rein it back and understand what the planning scheme does allow. Now, the planning scheme does in fact allow a whole range of signs without a permit. So under clause 520510, a sign identifying the functions of a property of a government department, public authority, municipal council, so anything at the traffic school, anything at any government, any of our council buildings does not require does not require a permit. A sign controlling traffic on public land, railway, does not require a permit. A sign in a road reserve does not require a permit, and this is regardless of zone, so on parkland or public use land. Now, interestingly, a sign can be displayed for a cultural or social or recreational event. It can be 5 square metres and it can stay for up to 3 months. So there's not even a need for a permit to have a sign for 3 months on parkland that is connected to recreational events. Under the same clause, a sign can be used to display a special event on a land, and there's not even a size restriction on that. So there are a whole range of signs under the planning scheme that are permitted without a permit, and our officers are best placed to work with clubs, as the point C sets out, to work with clubs to help the planning scheme be enforced as it ought be right here and now. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Hodgson?
Thanks, Mayor. I think, I understand, Councillor Bedio, where you've come from in suggesting this amendment, but it's something that I have concerns about in the sense of potentially getting too involved in operational matters, and what I liked about original point C was that it made it clear that that this was an operational matter to be managed by council officers. I think, not wanting to speak too far into suggesting a direction of what officers should be doing, but my understanding is that enforcement processes are exactly that. They're a process, and I've seen in other, we had a planning matter come to us recently that was seeking a retrospective approval to bring someone in line with the planning scheme who had acted without a permit but was able to subsequently apply for a permit to make them compliant with the scheme. And I think that there's an opportunity for that to happen here, because as Councillor Isa said, there are ways to lawfully display signs in public spaces, and I think, as the point A requests the report to understand how we can support them to work into those options, and I just personally think we need to let the officers manage the operational matter, so not supportive of this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I had concerns with the original notice of motion, but Councillor Bedio has put a little bit of a side view on this, which I'm sort of, a little bit happy about. But I just want to ask for an extension to my speech. And I was just to let you know, what I'm about to say is my personal opinion.
Councillor Sypek, remember, we're speaking to the amendment. You will have a chance to speak to the substantive as well when we get to it.
Oh, will I?
Yeah, yep.
Oh, okay then. I might just,
wait for that.
Leave it with that. That's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor wish to speak to the amendment? Just the amendment? If not, Councillor Bedio, do you wish to close?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just trying to assess the logic in not including this. So we're saying most clubs are non-compliant, but let's get a report to see how to make them compliant. But in the interim, potentially we're going to tell all the clubs to take away their signs. That doesn't sit well with me. I'm not sure if it sits well with my colleagues. We have asked for a moratorium before. I don't see why it would be of a major concern to stay with the status quo until we seek further direction from our officers and we seek some recommendations from our officers about how to progress.
And reapply to the minister.
Planning enforcement is a serious thing. It takes a lot of time for our officers. Now, I'm not 100% sure how many clubs we have, but auditing each of those grounds without firstly having the report in Section A, I think is a waste of time. I'm just noting Councillor Isaa's comments that this has been the status quo since 2020. We're stating it in a motion that we're noting the enforcement of the planning scheme requirements with respect to signage is an operational matter to be managed by council officers. We're essentially saying go out and enforce it. That doesn't sit well with me. So I really hope my colleagues will support me in support this amendment and for this moratorium.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. So we are putting to the vote the specific amendment under A3. All those in favour? Councillor Bettio, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Tyson. Those against?
Round 0.
Councillor Adams, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa. That amendment is carried. It then forms the substantive. Now, with the substantive, Councillor Isa had spoken as the mover. Councillor Hodgson as seconder. Councillor Bettio, you have 54 seconds remaining before in your address.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm much happier with this motion. I'll gladly support this motion. Thank you, Councillor Isa, for putting this motion forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bettio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the substantive motion? No? No one wants to speak to the substantive? Councillor Sypek?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, like I said, this is just my opinion. I was really concerned that if we didn't get this amendment up, you walk 500 metres down the road here, Mr Mayor, there are 2 massive signs on Queen's Park Pool with mauve on it. If we were going to fine anyone, we would have to go and fine ourselves, firstly. Secondly, on the Incinerator Art Complex, there is another one there as well. We would have to fine ourselves on the Incinerator Art Complex. Mr Mayor, I was never going to be a part of a council that was going to ruin local businesses and ruin local football clubs. How were you going to answer a question when an elderly couple are going to come and say to you, why did our lawn bowls club close? How are you going to answer when a mother comes to you and says, why was my Auskick closed? Because they couldn't get sponsorship. Sponsorship with local businesses and local clubs, and I'm talking tennis clubs, football clubs, soccer clubs, netball clubs, baseball clubs. It's a symbiont relationship, and it's been a symbiont relationship through every council in Victoria. If we'd have gone down this path, we would have been ground zero, Mr Mayor, for every other council to go down this path. What I really want to know, and the question I kept asking before is, we applied to the Minister, and our amendment to the planning scheme was not refused. It was brought back, it was sent back to us asking for further information, and then COVID hit. I really think that we should be going back to the Minister, reapplying and getting that planning amendment just like other cities have done in Victoria. Why are we now going up? Okay, I agree, there might be some clubs out there that are abusing this, and I agree with it. But then this is going to capture every single club, lawn bowls, bridge clubs, any club that you can think of. It's going to capture every single one of them. And if we had have gone down this path, What we're doing here is we've got temporary signs for special events for 3 months. So what you're telling me is we can't sponsor our local football clubs and our local sporting clubs, lawn bowls, the whole lot. But we can allow developers to put up the biggest signs that they want on a temporary basis for their special events while they're building their new developments. That will be allowed, but our local footy club won't be allowed to have Tony's Pies on there. Now, how are you going to tell a club that Tony's Pies, you can't have a pie night because Tony's gone out of business? You know why Tony's gone out of business? Because he relies on the football clubs when they have their special events. You know, I'm losing my voice and I'm getting really upset about this, Mr. Mayor. This is something that we should not be going down. Yes, I agree, there are certain people that are going a little bit overboard, but that can be worked out quite easily. But this would have captured every single, I don't know, club, whatever you want to call it, lawn bowls clubs. They rely on some of these sponsorships. They're going to close down. Like, this is ground zero stuff, guys. And do you want to be known as Moonee Valley as the council where all this started? Because I don't. And I don't want to be the angel of destruction, Mr. Mayor. And that's the reason why I didn't want to vote for it. So if you guys want to be the angels of destruction of sporting clubs and local businesses, go for it. But you're not going to have John Sypek's name there, I can tell you that.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor wish to speak to the substantive? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I've really enjoyed listening to the debate because I actually feel as though there are some really strong arguments from either side. I was here back in 2019 when we were really trying to work through this, and obviously I've seen what's progressed through COVID. I've seen more signs go up. I completely understand basically every single argument that has come around the chamber. I didn't support the extra dot point because I thought that it probably was going a little bit into the operational realms, but I think the actual clincher is that we need the report. I feel like this whole thing is if we get the report, then we can make a more informed decision. Therefore, I would like to move an alternative, Mayor.
An amendment.
An amendment, sorry. An amendment, not an alternative, please no. Just an amendment. I would like to delete the words, and sorry, I've got that big screen in, it's a bit of a distance away. So for
Sorry, Councillor, not Councillor McSweet. Governance, could you just pause the clock for me?
Thanks. So for A to read, request that the Chief Executive Officer bring a report to the next OCM. To the next ordinary meeting of council. That, and then, yep, and then continues as is. So basically what we're saying is that we understand that this is a really contentious issue. The report, I've actually looked what the report needs to, so I've moved it.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just waiting for the screen to be updated. My apologies. I should have chaired that better.
Can I ask for a point of
we'll just
now or do you need a seconder?
No, we'll just get the exact amendment just up on the screen. So to the next ordinary meeting of council.
Yes. Okay, just the council meeting's fine then.
Oh, the next council meeting? Okay. So we have the addition of the next council meeting and the deletion of the reference to September. Councillors, we're across what the amendment is, the inclusion and deletion of words. Thank you. Do I have a seconder to Councillor Byrne's amendment? Councillor Adams. Now, Councillor Byrne, we are speaking purely to the amendment, which is purely regarding...
Dates.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Floor is yours. 3 minutes on the clock, please, Governance.
Thank you, Mayor. This amendment is so simple, and I really do think that it really is going to cover so many of the issues that have come up in the chamber tonight. We really need this report, and we want it as soon as possible because we've obviously got issues if we don't do anything, we've got issues if we do something. So if we can make an informed decision in a timely manner, then that is what is best for everyone in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Adams, speaking to the specific... Sorry, point of clarification.
Point of clarification, please, Mayor. Can I please direct my question to either yourself or probably the CEO? Considering the workload that Council has, can this effectively be done, this report being brought to the next Council meeting, please?
CEO?
The initial advice by the latest...
Microphone.
Thank you, Susan Mayor. I believe the initial advice by the end of September was discussed with officer, so this will be extremely challenging because the draft agenda is due Thursday.
Okay.
For next council meeting.
So 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you.
That clarify?
Yeah. I might ask another point of clarification though, please, if I could, Mayor. Obviously, that short time frame would not allow for any consultation either, so it would be, can I confirm whether there'd be any consultation over the next 2 days? Is that the proper way to confirm that?
Point of clarification, given that this amendment is specifically speeding up a process, I'm happy for the CEO to address that point of clarification. So the point of clarification is, does 2 days enable that report to be presented as well as it would...
And consult.
Yeah. Do you have time to prepare and consult the report based on that, the amendment?
Through the Mayor, I cannot see the resolution requires a consultation in writing the report. So
I was planning on requesting that.
Okay, yeah.
Initial writing report is without consultation by the end of September. That's my understanding.
So I think this point of clarification was, can what's required under A be delivered within the time frame specified in this amendment? Sorry to rephrase, but...
Not next council meeting, sorry.
Okay.
No. Thank you.
Councillor?
Can I then withdraw the amendment?
I think we can with the support. Let me bear with us just so I can make sure. Yes. I'm just looking for, under section 25 of our governance rules, just in regards to introducing a motion or an amendment, if there is the capacity. Yeah, we do have a seconder though. Yes, Councillor Adams has seconded. Look,
I'll do another one.
Look, if you just bear with me just a minute or so, it is silent on that, but I may look at, in regards to a motion and not amendment, and then make a consistent ruling. So while it's silent on withdrawing an amendment, it does state under section 33 of the governance rule, withdrawal of motions. Before any motion is put to the vote, it may be withdrawn by the mover and seconder with the leave of council. So if you would like to move a motion to withdraw, Councillor Adams, with leave of council, it goes to vote. Yes. So at the moment I'm dealing with a procedural motion which is the withdrawal of the amendment. Now the mover and seconder have agreed, but it needs to go to a vote for this amendment to be withdrawn. All those in favour of withdrawing the specific amendment of Councillor Byrne? That is carried unanimously. So that amendment is withdrawn. I'll just give governance a moment to Control Z a couple of times.
Just do it the following fortnight. I'll move another one for the following fortnight. So August.
Right, so we are back to the substantive. At this stage, Councillor Isa as mover has spoken, Councillor Hodgson has seconded, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Byrne, you had 2 minutes on the clock when you moved your amendment that was not one, so you may resume at 2 minutes. Thank you, Governor.
Thanks, Mayor. Can I please move an amendment?
Yes, Councillor Byrne.
Just to change the word September to August. Thank you.
So the amendment with us is the deletion of the word September in point A and the addition of the word August. Councillors, do I have a seconder? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Byrne, again, if you could speak to your specific amendment.
Thanks, Mayor. I obviously wanted to try to do this to try to get a fair outcome for all parties. Obviously 2 weeks and the timing of the agenda wasn't quite right, and obviously it does make it difficult when it's in a notice of motion and we don't have the officers around in terms of exactly how much time it will take. I'm mindful that point 1 has sort of already been done. We know the clarification, that information has already been circulated, so it was only really the point 2 that needs to be worked on, looking at longer and shorter term options to support the reasonable display of sponsorship signage. Obviously, if there needs to be a couple of weeks consultation with the clubs and feedback there, but we do need to, we can't just let this drag on and on and on. It has been going since 2019, so just bringing it forward that month, I think will make a big difference to everyone, because I don't think the clubs or local residents or councillors for that matter really want these things dragging on. We want to get to the report and be able to make an informed decision as soon as possible, and if as soon as possible is not next meeting but in August, I'm completely fine with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to the specific amendment?
I think the sooner that we can deal with this issue and find a way forward, the better. So I'm fully supportive of bringing this report forward, so long as it doesn't jeopardise the quality of the information, and apologies to officers for the increase in workload.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Any other councillor wish to speak to the specific amendment? Councillor Sharp?
Can I please ask a point of clarification?
Yes.
To yourself or the CEO again, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Is August, the end of August 2021 achievable, please, CEO?
CEO?
Thank you, through the chair. As I advised before, I believe the initial date of by the end of September was consulted with officer, and that was the recommended time frame, considering to do point 2 in a responsible way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Did you want to speak to the amendment?
Oh, I understand the councillors wanted to get it sorted out, but we need information to be factual, accurate, comprehensive, and if we need another month for that to occur, I don't support shortening the time frame. I understand exactly where you're coming from, Councillor Byrne, but we need the information to be correct, and if we hasten this and hurry it up just to save a month, I don't think it's worth it, because it's such a big issue. These zones are so complex. I don't know that any of us have a real good grasp of exactly how complex this is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor wish to speak to the specific amendment? If not, Councillor Byrne, would you like to close?
Thank you. I'm not going to withdraw it this time, because whilst there was officer advice initially to say the end of September, that potentially was saying we've already got X, Y and Z on our plate. If we're going to add something in, yeah, sure, we'll get it done by the end of September. I'm pretty sure officers will probably review this council meeting. They'll understand how important this is, and perhaps it is something that they will be talking with their managers about in terms of reprioritising work, perhaps. I don't know. I don't want to get involved in the operational side of things. But to say that a report, that some consultation and providing short and long-term options can't be done in a month and a half, people are worried that things in councils go slow. And if they think that a report can't be done in that time, I'm just kind of just a bit unusual, I suppose. But in saying that, if we get a report back at the end of August and it's not done well, we will do what gets done multiple times in every council year, and that's defer the report or ask for further information at the end of August. So we can get it back. Hopefully it's done well, because people will know, the officers will know how important this is, and we can work from there as opposed to hanging it out for an extra month. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. I will put this specific amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Tyson. Those against? Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek. This amendment is carried. Then forms the substantive. At this stage on the substantive, Councillor Isa has spoken as mover, Councillor Hodgson as seconder. Councillor Bedio, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Byrne, you still have 2 minutes on the clock.
On the substantive.
On the substantive, you've used up a minute, but you've still got 2 minutes before you move the second of your amendments.
That's fine, Mayor.
Oh, I was proud I'd remembered that. Any other councillor wish to speak to the substantive? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I suppose I can't emphasise enough that we need to have accurate and comprehensive information when it comes to this report. It's extremely complex, and like I said, the previous council in moving this moratorium back in 2019 understood the complexities around our sporting clubs and around businesses that support them, and the local signage that is needed in order to provide a benefit to the club, the business, and members of the club, and it activates our reserves and all the rest of it as well. So understanding all that, in order to garner the most comprehensive information, I think it's really going to be really important that we do consult. And I note that there is no point there regarding consultation in the 2019 motion. There is a point E regarding consultation, so I would like to move an amendment, please, noting a point D.
All right, we have an amendment, which is the addition of a point. Sorry, if we scroll down, it might be point E. Point E, or double it?
D, oh sorry, E.
Is it, or is it D? No, it is D. You're right. Yeah, it's D, correct.
D?
Yep.
Note, consultation will be undertaken with clubs and lessees to inform the preparation of options and guidelines for signs in open space reserves.
Councillor Sharp, if you could just run that over to governance for them to just to quickly pop that up on the screen. Might have to. And I think just lessees, not leases, is that?
Lessees.
Lessees,
yes, sorry, lessees.
All right, councillors, so let me update my sheet. Filling up a page. All right, so we have an amendment from Councillor Sharp that reads the addition of point D. Note, consultation will be undertaken with clubs and lessees to inform the preparation of options and guidelines for signs in open space reserves. Councillors, do I have a seconder for this amendment? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to this specific amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, yep, we consult members of our community, our residents, organisations about anything that is going to affect them. Obviously, anything to do with signage is going to affect all of our clubs, and like Councillor Sypek referred to, it is all-encompassing. Bowls, croquet, cricket, every club in our municipality. So I think if we are going to have a report presented to us that is comprehensive and factual, we need to be consulting, and I look forward to seeing what those responses will be. I'm not sure if councillors actually realise that we did have COVID, and COVID obviously impacted our clubs enormously. It has impacted our businesses enormously. We are certainly trying to help our businesses as much as we can by the way of grants and things like that, but our clubs rely on our local businesses to sponsor them, and in the quid pro quo arrangement, signage is associated with that. So it's an enormous issue, and like I said, COVID has certainly thrown a spanner in the works with our clubs, our businesses, and this amendment that was presented to Dallawoop, and basically we did not get the information back to them in an appropriate time frame because COVID hit. So our amendment, like I said earlier in the piece, was not refused for any reason other than being a delay with COVID, because we could not prepare the guidelines and do further auditing because of COVID. So I would like to get those facts straight. I'm also a little bit concerned about councillors talking about operational issues and getting involved too much in operational issues. When a statement was made earlier saying the planning scheme should be enforced right here, right now. So I'm very pleased that Councillor Bedio has put up the amendment for the moratorium and at least got some sense into what we're talking, a little bit of sense into what we're talking about around this chamber tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sypek, wish to speak to this specific amendment, point D?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And once again, this is just my opinion. I'm just quite clarifying that, just my opinion. I think this is a good amendment. It'll give a little bit of extra time. And the funny thing is, we're going to consult everyone except the clubs. Like, seriously, guys, you know, we're calling some of these clubs perpetrators and some of these clubs are doing the right thing, but we're not going to consult them. I mean, it makes perfect sense for this amendment. And, you know, if you don't vote against it, if you vote against this, you're basically saying we're not going to talk to the clubs because there's no need to. We're just going to do it without talking to the clubs because they're the ones who got the signs up. So I fully support this amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor wish to speak to this specific amendment? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I think this amendment makes a lot of sense. I would hope that officers would have done this in any case when developing their report, but I think it's just good to include that in any case. Noting that we're talking about signs that pertain to sponsorships for community groups, I think the planning scheme is mainly, well, my understanding would be that the planning scheme was designed around signage for business, and it's a very different use case for sporting clubs. So taking that into consideration when forming recommendations to council, I think is useful.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Any other councillor wish to speak to this specific amendment? Councillor Isa.
Just point of clarification, if I may, Mayor. I apologise for protracting things further, but if I may ask through through the CEO. When DELP was seeking some further information from council, is it? I guess we're still on notice of motion, aren't we? I'm not able to ask about a fact, am I? I'll just say what the question is, and then I'll assume that I may not actually be able to get an answer. I apologise. I guess what I was trying to find out was whether, when DELP was seeking extra information, what they were trying to establish was whether the moratorium was having an impact on how many signs went up, which is what I suspect. But I don't think I can ask that question, so instead maybe I'll just use my time to make that point. So sorry about that, Mayor. I'll start my whole utterance again. Not being able to clarify this, I suspect that when DELP was asking for that further information, that was then, and then subsequently, having not got that information, they then refused the amendment. I suspect that the further information they were seeking...
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Aren't we talking about the amendment, not about something else?
So what's your point of order, sorry?
The point of order is, shouldn't we be talking about the amendment, not about other things?
So just remember, with a point of order, you do need to raise the governance rules. So, sorry, Councillor Syberg, unless you can do that, I've just got to give the call back to Councillor Reiser.
So I'm just responding to a comment
That's fine, Mr Mayor. I'm answering your question.
Oh, yeah, but sorry, you don't get a right of reply because you've called a point of order. I've ruled on the point of order. So...
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you... Sorry, my apologies that you...
Councillor Reiser has the floor.
Sorry, I'm responding to a comment that was made in moving this amendment. The comment was made, excuse me, that DELP was not refusing the amendment, they were seeking further information, and I was just pointing out that they were seeking further information to ascertain how the signage was going in Moonee Valley. And what we've established is that the audit shows that the signage went up tenfold at one place, went up fivefold at another place. So the information that would have gone back to DELP...
Point of order, Mayor, I think that is an assertion, and I'm not sure that that's fact. We don't know what DELP was thinking. I don't think any of us know what DELP was thinking around this table. Point of order, please.
So, point of order again, councillors, I remind you, if we're calling a point of order, as per governance rules, we need to state the provision in the governance rules.
Misleading information.
That's not a provision. Remember, a provision can only be based on our governance rules if a statement derogatory or defamatory, something not being true is...
Not being true, it's an assertion.
If you let me finish my ruling, something not being true is not a valid point of order. I'm not saying that what is being stated is not true, but disagreement or thinking something's not factual, unfortunately our governance rules doesn't allow that. Councillor Isa, you have the call.
My phrasing was that I suspect that what they were trying to ascertain was how the proliferation of signage was...
I suspect Richmond's going to win the grand final.
Councillor Syberg, Councillor Isa has the call.
I suspect.
Only the councillor who has the call may speak. Councillor Isa, you have the call.
Thanks, Mayor. The specific amendment is noting consultation will be undertaken with clubs and leasees. Obviously, there's some crucial people that are missed out of that, and that is residents who live around open space that's currently being used for the sale of advertising. So when people advertise on a billboard, they buy space to advertise. What's happening in our open spaces at the moment is effectively our open space is becoming a free billboard that residents who live adjacent to open space have to look at all the time. There are rules in the planning scheme around signage because of amenity issues, and residential amenity with respect to signage is respected in streetscapes, on roads, in a whole range of a whole range of landscapes. And our open spaces at the moment don't just belong to our sporting clubs, they also belong to the residents, to the users who now, if they want to go to a particular, to some of the open spaces, are surrounded by advertising. They can't see the trees for advertising. So what we're saying is that it's okay for our public open space at the behest of sporting clubs to be used for free sponsorship. And I'm brave enough, I'm brave enough to say that that's not okay. And you can call me all sorts of names, you can call me whatever you want and tell me that I'm evil and a devil or whatever utterances were made before, but at least I'm brave enough to say I don't want our open space to be used in this way.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak to this amendment? If not, Councillor Sharp, wish to close for this amendment, point D? No. So, councillors, putting this specific amendment to the vote. Sorry, I just thought that was Councillor Tyson, but it wasn't. Sorry, Councillor Isa. That's why I was trying to work out who the individual was. Councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Adams. Those against? Okay, so that's carried unanimously. So, councillors, that brings us back to the substantive. At this stage, Councillor Isa spoken as mover, Councillor Hodgson as seconder, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp. You actually had 2 minutes left on the clock before you added that amendment. If you would like to...
Mayor, before Councillor Sharp starts, can I please move an amendment?
Yes, it's within your right, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like point D to read, note consultation will be undertaken with all stakeholders, including with local residents, clubs and lessees, to inform the preparation of options and guidelines for signs in open space reserves.
If you may head over to governance and just...
That's spot on.
You would, okay. So we're just including local with it. Yes.
I'll head over.
Just yes.
Point of clarification.
Just can we just wait because we're still in camera? We'll just wait for Councillor Byrne to be back at the chambers.
I've got a rattle, didn't I? Made all the rest of them shit themselves.
Now, Councillor Bedio, if I could just... so we seek a seconder. We've got an amendment on the floor, which is the addition of the words with all... the addition of the words all stakeholders, including local residents, to point D. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Byrne's amendment? No, you can't. If not, that would... Councillor Adams seconds that. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the specific amendment?
Point of clarification, sorry, Mayor,
Yes,
if I may. Through to manager, through to the CEO, given the reduced time frame that's been updated in section A, is this possible within the time frame stipulated? Considering undertaking...
So, like the amendment that we are dealing with is the inclusion of all stakeholders, including local residents. I would prefer that this is dealt with before worrying about how that affects the substantive. So my ruling is that that point of clarification is not relevant, and I'll go to Councillor Byrne to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that there's been a lot of really good points made, and I think it was Councillor Sypek made a really good point about how we absolutely have to consult with the clubs, and I completely agree with that. And we do. We absolutely have to consult with the clubs, and I took it as a given that it would occur, but I'm glad for the point D to go in, just to make sure it's crystal clear. But we've got to remember, as I think Councillor Isa said, that it's not just the clubs, it's all the stakeholders, and it's the local residents as well. We're really lucky that we have your say, so we can do consultation, as we've seen, in a relatively small, short period of time. So I feel like by just consulting the clubs would actually be unfair to all park users. You want to make sure that you're covering everyone. So this is hopefully it's all stakeholders. It's not just clubs. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Adams, do you wish to speak to the specific amendment? No. Any other councillor wish to speak? And just the specific amendment, local residents, Councillor Sypek.
Councillor Byrne, great idea. I think local residents And you'll probably find that most of the local residents have lived with these signs, like especially around East Keilor. These people don't sell houses around there. They've been in their houses for 50, 60 years. And they're probably some of the actual sponsors there. And they like to see their signs across the road. So I'm telling you, I really know two people that actually sponsor a club, and they actually live across the road, and they can wake up every morning and see their wonderful sign out there. So I think it's fantastic. Great ideas, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor wish to speak to this specific amendment? Councillor Isa.
Thanks very much for that addition, Councillor Byrne. It was absolutely why I was reluctant initially to potentially support it, and I couldn't work out a way to make it a holistic consultation, so I'm very grateful for your addition there. Of course, all we need to do the whole lot of consultation and not pick and choose which people we ask.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak to this specific amendment? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add, Councillor Sypek, I can send you about 20 emails from neighbour complaints about signage in Buckley Ward. So I don't think that's correct. I think that the neighbours are getting a bit tired of seeing the signs blocking their beautiful views of our trees and our open spaces. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Any other councillor wish to speak to this specific amendment? If not, Councillor Byrne wish to close. We're putting the specific amendment to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. We move back to the substantive. At this stage, Councillor Isa has spoken as mover, Councillor Hodgson as seconder, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Sharp. You've got 2 minutes on the clock.
Before Councillor Sharp goes. Can I move an amendment, please, Mr Mayor?
It's within your right, Councillor Sypek.
Thank you.
What is your amendment?
Well, my amendment is, I think we're forgetting the big...
No, hang on. No, not an argument. I just need the specific words.
My amendment is that we should also reapply to the Planning Minister for the amendment.
Do you want to just...
Simple. Reapply to the Minister.
So the addition of a point E, so we just have to go the exact words.
Reapply to the Minister with the amendment to the planning scheme, and wait for that to be included in the report.
Councillors, I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to adjourn the meeting briefly just to see if that actual amendment's contrary to the actual motion. So we'll just adjourn the meeting for 3 minutes. Of Council for the 13th of July 2021. We're currently on item 11.3 and we have an amendment that has been moved by Councillor Sypek. The amendment is the addition of point E, which reads, reapply to the Minister to reconsider the position held in relation to C203 Moon. Councillors, do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the specific amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we apply to any minister for anything, we usually get an answer yes or no. I think in this case, due to COVID, I think it was a hastened decision, and we actually have no way of recalling or going to VCAT with the minister's decision, but I really, really would like the opportunity. If we're going to go down this path, let's exhaust every single avenue before we take draconian actions against our sporting clubs. Like, we don't need to go hard. Let's try and resolve this in a civil manner rather than going tearing down signs, stopping Auskick and closing down lawn bowls, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to go down that path. I really, really would like to consider and exhaust every single option. And if that means reapplying to the Minister and getting a straight answer, well, let's reapply.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp, wish to speak to the specific amendment?
Happy to support this amendment of Councillor Sypek's. Look, the amendment that was put up back in 2019 was extremely important. And, you know, with all the external factors at play, including COVID, I think it's probably our best course of action to progress that and reapply to the Minister, because it was a really positive step forward in relation to this issue that, you know, is obviously potentially hanging over our heads. So it was a positive step forward, and Councillor Sypek certainly knows what he's talking about when it comes to these sorts of things, and I'm very, very happy to support going back to the Minister to see if he can reconsider his position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor wish to speak to this specific amendment? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Can I just seek a point of clarification through the mover of the amendment?
Yes.
Councillor Sypek, in seeking to reapply to the Minister, is the intent there to write to him and ask him to reconsider the refusal?
No, it's to reapply and ask him to reconsider.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Did you want to speak to the specific amendment?
I will speak to the amendment. Just to say, look, I think I agree with exhausting all avenues to resolve this issue. Obviously, in seconding the original motion and speaking to it, it was about seeking that clarity for all of our clubs. I do take issue with Councillor Sypek's characterisation of the intent of that motion to close down our sporting clubs. That's certainly not the intent. And I think that the debate, while robust in the chambers, has lost sight a little bit of the intent, which is to support our clubs, to maintain their financial sustainability, and support the use of our open space and public safety and amenity. I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, wish to speak to the amendment?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, the planning scheme applies across the whole of Victoria, and it's clear in the planning scheme that there are some really strict rules around the signs for public open space across the whole of Victoria. And those rules are there for a reason. They're there because public open space is precious and it's important to maintain the amenity of that. Now, the Minister obviously asked for some more information, but then ultimately refused the amendment. Now, of course, we don't know exactly why the amendment was refused, but if we're moving from a position where the planning scheme itself has a very, very low threshold around signs that can be on the planning scheme across the whole of Victoria. And we've been told that our attempt to change that is not acceptable. I'm just not sure what we think our chances might be in terms of reconsidering that, because this is not just about Moonee Valley, it's actually about public open space across the whole of Victoria in terms of the way the Minister might choose to respond to that. Now, although the planning scheme has strict rules around signs on public open space, it does allow, without a permit, signs on event days, signs for cultural events, signs for signage, signs, a whole raft of signs are allowed under the planning scheme. Signs are also allowed on clothes, on A-frames, on cars. On a match day, a club can bring out a whole raft of signage. There is absolutely no intent to stop clubs from being able to raise the money they need to through sponsorship, but they need to do it in ways that don't have permanent impact on our open space, because our open space is for the enjoyment of everybody, and that's what our planning scheme across Victoria makes very, very clear, that clubs can get sponsorship in a whole range of other ways, and that's what our Minister is probably going to say back to us, that we need to work with our clubs to help them get the financial sustainability while also protecting open space as our planning scheme sets out. So if I can just be really clear that my intent in bringing this to the chamber is because it's been an issue that's bothered residents. Residents have not enjoyed seeing our open space be used for advertising. It needs to be brought to a head, and we need to help our clubs to find other ways of staying financially sustainable, getting more logos on whatever they can, hats, pens, gloves, socks, golf balls, footballs, whatever we can make work, and work with them to help maintain their financial sustainability while also protecting the amenity of our open space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor, this specific amendment? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you. I won't be supporting this specific amendment because I feel like we've been speaking this whole time about two things. One, how much we want to consult with the community, and two, not making a decision without information in front of us. And we're in this unique position without point E to actually get a report back and then decide if we want to reapply to the Minister. So that will be coming in August. We've waited this long, we can wait another 6 weeks. It'll probably sit on the Minister's desk for a while anyway if we end up going down that route. So I feel, just to be fair and consistent across all of the things we've spoken about for the past hour or so, I won't be supporting this because we haven't consulted with anyone in regards to whether or not we want to do it, and we don't have an informed report. And I think it would actually, there could be potentially people making a decision on this not actually knowing the specifics of what we actually applied for in that motion back in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to the specific amendment? If not, Councillor Sypek, wish to close.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And once again, in my opinion, when we reapply to the Minister, we will be using very similar documentation when we originally applied. And in that original application, this is all about not the big clubs or the clubs that are abusing this system. This is a voice for the small clubs, the ones that actually do the right thing, the ones that have a small little income, that have a small little base of a signage, of sponsorships. We're going to rip that away from them if this goes through. It's going to be the small clubs that suffer.
Sorry, could I ask a point of clarification?
Yes, we could pause the clock. Point of clarification
to the mover. Given that the Minister, when we applied, asked for an audit, asked for updated information, would it be your intention as part of this reapplication to provide them with the updated information about the signage that has proliferated across our open spaces?
I think that's been quite clearly demonstrated in all the amendments that we're going to be consulting everyone. So I don't know what you were listening to, but that's what I understand, that we're going to be consulting everyone and gathering all the information. And in my amendment is we reapply to the minister. We want to exhaust every opportunity before we crush these little clubs to nothing and we kill local businesses, because this is a symbiont relationship, Mr. Mayor.
That's answered the point of clarification. Councillor Isa. Okay. Councillor Sypek, continue.
Well, once again, I am the voice of the small little club that's going to get crushed. Do we really want to be ground zero, Mr. Mayor? No. I want to exhaust every single opportunity. And if that means reapplying to the minister, that means reapplying to the minister. Why would we leave the most crucial person in this whole debate and not try one more time with the minister? Why wouldn't we do that? And if we don't do that, it would be an absolute shame.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. So I'll put this specific amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Bedio, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek. Those against? Councillor Adams, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Isa. That amendment is lost. So we move to the substantive. At this stage, Councillor Isa as the... Oh, so many pages. 3 back. Councillor Isa as the mover. Councillor Hodgson as the seconder. Bedio, Byrne, Sypek. Councillor Sharp, you have 2 minutes on the clock.
2 minutes, thank you. Okay, well, I've completely lost all train of thought now, but suffice to say, this is a topic that, as I said earlier, is very complex, so I want to be able to know that we are getting all the information that we need in a comprehensive report with consultation included, which I think is absolutely imperative. I'm a little bit concerned about the date, but I'm certainly not going to change anything now. But, you know, I think September would have been better, basically because we're consulting. But I look forward to the report, and in the meantime, having the status quo remain, and look forward to getting a complete, comprehensive report that we can base an informed decision upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Sharp?
Can I move that the... hold on, I've got to get the words. That the motion now be put.
Yes, so Councillor Sharp asking that the motion be put. That means motion goes to the vote. I need a seconder. Councillor Sypek. So, councillors, we've got a closure motion, which is a procedural motion. What it means is we'll vote on the procedural motion. If that is successful, then we'll put the substantive straight to the vote, which most people have spoken. So all those in favour of the motion to be put, or the closure motion? Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek. No, those against? Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa. That procedural motion is lost. Any other councillor wish to speak to the substantive? No? If not...
Now we're going to go to the vote, are we?
Well, it's, under the governance rules, I need to give a right of reply to moves of amendment. Councillor Byrne? Oh, look, I'm working backwards here because there's no... Oh, you had the most recent. Yours? Yes, backwards back to the original mover.
Thank you. And I am glad that I get a right of reply because I don't like to be gagged. No one in this chamber likes to be gagged. So, yes, anyway, moving on.
You actually get two. You get two rights of reply.
Two goes, right. So I suppose this is basically how council works. We obviously started off with a notice of motion, and it is toing and froing, and I don't think anyone gets necessarily exactly what they would have wanted, but that's how we sort of have to work to get something that will eventually, sort of when it evens out, is something that can appease the majority of councillors, which hopefully we have. Can I foreshadow a motion just in the case it gets lost?
Yeah, you can, yes.
Just in case.
Yep.
Because that would be a great waste of work if it does. So I feel like we're at somewhere now where we can go out, consult with a wide range of users and actually get on top of this, because we can't have this dragging in, ongoing. So I feel like it has been a very lively debate, and with very good views coming across the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Working back on the amendments, Councillor Sharp, right of reply? All good, thank you. Councillor Byrne, right of reply? Councillor Bedio, right of reply?
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be brief. Just to say that I understand there's a little bit of angst through this, but I think what we've come up with is a brilliant example of democracy. I think this makes a lot more sense. We're seeking a pathway forward, but we're also not going to be punishing any clubs in the interim until we have that determination, until we have an officer's recommendation. Sorry to anyone at home if there's still people watching, but that's sometimes how things happen here at council. I'm very happy with the result, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Isa, mover of the original, would you like right of reply?
I'll just be brief, Mayor. You were generous with me earlier, so I'll just be very brief. Just to say that... Sorry, is there something funny?
Sorry, Councillor Isa's got the call.
That I need to correct something that Councillor Sypek said earlier, which is that somehow this motion was against smaller clubs. The point is that some clubs have made a lot of money by selling...
Point of clarification, Mr Mayor, I didn't say that about small clubs. I said this will adversely affect small clubs.
Sypek, a point of clarification is if you need something clarified through an officer or through the original mover of the motion, it's not to clarify something that you...
I will not have words put in my mouth, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Sypek made a ruling that is not a point of clarification. Councillor Isa, you have the call.
That some clubs have managed to make a lot of money out of the lax approach that's been taken to signage, and clubs that have done the right thing and have taken a reasonable approach and have not exploited that are ones who've not made a lot of money out of this. So this motion is in fact trying to redress the balance and trying to redress that inequity that's arisen, and trying to support a fair playing field for all clubs across Victoria, in fact, who have to comply with the planning scheme. Clubs in Moreland and Brimbank and that compete with our clubs don't get to make money out of selling signage in the same way that our clubs have been able to do. So I'm actually trying to redress that. With respect to the point that was made about avoiding any draconian measures, because the right of reply is all about rebuttal, so I'm trying to rebut the things that have been put forward. The planning officers have not taken a draconian approach. The point of the point C in the motion is to acknowledge that the way in which the planning scheme is enforced is entirely at the behest of the planning officers, and councillors have no say in that, and it would be overstepping our overstepping our policy mark into operational matters if we did. So it is up to the officers as to how that's enforced, and it will always remain that way, regardless of what we would move in the chamber. So there's been no attempt at any stage to make that any more draconian to change the manner in which the enforcement has been undertaken. but it's to put clubs on notice that the planning scheme does not allow what is currently on our grounds. And if anything is taken from tonight, I really hope that people know that what is currently on grounds is not allowed under the planning scheme, and eventually it's going to have to go. So we are giving as much notice as possible around how, for clubs to consider how it is that they then approach their sponsorship and what other creative measures they can think of in order to deal with that. The other thing is that there is always the option for residents, anybody who is affected by this, to go to VCAT and seek enforcement orders. So it's not just council, in fact, that enforces the planning scheme. The planning scheme is something that belongs to the whole of Victoria, and VCAT exists to enable people to enforce it in different ways. So it's... Sorry, is there a problem, Councillor Bettio?
No, sorry, it was me. Sorry.
I didn't say anything, Councillor Isa.
Councillor Isa has the call. Councillor Isa, time is almost up, but given the unique circumstances of there being a considerable amount of amendments, I'm happy for you to finish your notes.
Sorry, Mayor, thanks. I'll finish up now and just say that the point was that this issue around enforcement and whether council is being draconian in its enforcement or not is somewhat moot, given that VCAT can be asked by anybody to enforce the planning scheme and can make an enforcement order that the scheme be enforced.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillors, I'll put the substantive to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously.
Support the NIMBYs, hey?
Councillors? Item 12 is urgent. Councillors, Chair's got the call. The next item of business is urgent business. Councillors, do we have any urgent business? There being none, we move to item 13, which is confidential reports, and there are none. So for those watching at home, that brings us to the close of the meeting. We thank you for your interest in tonight's meeting. Our next council meeting will be Tuesday, the 27th of July at 6:30 p.m. Meeting is now closed.